This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
I was. Part of the reason we had so much fun being Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
On a Friday morning, shall we welcome in Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent, end of July 2022. Plenty of reasons to have a smile on my face this morning talking with you. You're a big reason why. Jason, first one in on the YouTube live stream this morning with a happy Friday. Roger, Colette, Anthony, all up and rolling. Good morning, UFAs. Indeed, sir. Plenty of Gamecock news to get to. Rick Sandage, big defensive lineman, top signee in 2018. Unfortunately, his career is over from a football perspective in baseball. Josiah Sightler, big first baseman from Swansea. Big, bright finish to the 2022 baseball season from the Gamecock perspective is moving on to professional baseball. But I want to start this morning with what took some time on, I think it was 2 days ago now, and it's still just kind of mind-boggling in so many ways. That Kyler Murray thing with the Arizona Cardinals. Signed a huge $230.5 million contract that just happened to have a clause in there that said, you got to study 4 hours a week. Independent study, Kyler. Otherwise, we don't have to pay you. Mind-boggling, man. I'm just shaking my head over here when I say it out loud still. Now, yesterday, after this came out, after everyone in the country, everyone in the world who's watched football, who enjoys watching football, who certainly respects the talent of a guy like Kyler Murray, and then talks about these massive contracts that are given out with tons of guaranteed money. I think $106 million is where his was, $160 maybe with injury. You read this, which how the team didn't anticipate this public reaction is why I'm shaking my head and still on this topic, right? How you don't have the foresight to know how this comes off as a massive insult, and Kyler coming out yesterday and saying, yeah, it's disrespectful. How do people that get paid lots of money not see this coming, man? Arizona front office number one, but then Kyler Murray himself and his representatives number two. How does it get to this point? It's supposed to be professional sports. This wasn't handled very professionally at all. So now you take it away and you look even just as bad. Maybe not even worse. I don't know how you look even worse as an NFL franchise. And we're going to get a qualified opinion on an NFL franchise, by the way, coming up at 9 o'clock this morning. First NFL first-round draft pick in the history of University of South Carolina, Rick Sanford, set to join us. The New England Patriots. It was the pre-Bill Belichick era, so a different type of organization back then, but still being part of an organization, being a valued member of an organization as a first-round draft pick. Personal experience from Rick. Well, I'm really interested in hearing his opinion, and he's not afraid to give his opinion. One of the reasons we're having him on this morning, again, 9 o'clock, when he's set to join us. About 8:30 or so, we'll get some more information about the Gamecocks Plus streaming service from one of the guys who'll be in charge of this thing. my former intern over at 107.5 The Game, and we had him on as a WRDW TV producer / anchor. He was doing it all over in Augusta. Dakota Watson has now transitioned back to his home in Columbia and has landed this new job and this Gamecocks Plus streaming service, more content for Gamecock fans. So looking forward to talking to him as well. Kirby weighing in this morning as well with a happy Friday, Tim. Happy Friday to you as well. I'm just going to say as well 1,000 times apparently. Because this Cardinal stuff does have me flustered. This Kyler Murray stuff. Where does the blame lie here? Somebody's got to get fired for this, right? Somebody in the Arizona front office. You can't keep your job if you thought this was a good idea. I understand. I saw the quote, right? I think this happened. I'm not even sure when Kyler Murray put this out there. I know it was a quote that was dug up after this clause kind of was unearthed from the contract, just saying that he doesn't have to kill himself watching tape. He's blessed with the ability to see things as they're happening, or maybe right before they're happening, he's saying. So when you read that, you can understand. And don't get me wrong, I understand an organization and their concern about a franchise quarterback not putting in the time they feel like is necessary to prepare for games week in and week out. I get the concern. The problem is you don't then give them $230 million. Or you got to figure out some way to take care of that concern one way or another. Either you're too concerned about it to make him your franchise quarterback, or you've addressed that concern with him and you are comfortable now with how things are going to move forward at franchise quarterback, knowing that a massive, how many figures is that? It's 7 once you get to $1 million. So it's 9. It's $250 million almost. That can change a person. And you got to make sure that's not going to change your quarterback, or if it's going to change him, it's going to change him in the positive direction for your franchise and make him even more invested, or get him to do even more of what you require / prefer him to do. And this was just embarrassing on all sides, right? On all sides. A great example. I feel like it'll be taught in sport management classes forever moving forward now. How not to handle a big-time contract. What clause not to put in there. Hope also weighing in this morning. Good morning, Hope. Happy Friday to you too. So that's I just had to get that off the chest. Just the knee-jerk reaction that I try to avoid in general. That's with the emotional one, and you read it and you learn. The more you learn about it, the dumber it gets, kind of thing. That's how I see this one. Love to hear your thoughts. If you have a reasonable explanation, or you can play even devil's advocate about where the Cardinals were coming from here, or where things maybe were miscommunicated, or how it. I'd love to hear it. Love to hear it. But first, need to focus more on the Gamecock news at hand. Rick Sandich, defensive lineman, top signing in that class of 2018. It was at Shane Beamer's golf event yesterday. Birdies with Beamer out at Cobblestone Park after the golf, which Beamer doesn't play, by the way. He just goes around and tries to spread his presence amongst all the players there, all the participants in the golf outing, I should say. That's how he opened, was mentioning this. Not much news, but this is a pretty big but. Unfortunately for Rick Sandage, injury has cut his career short, and he put out a message on social media. I want to read that to you now. It is with great sadness Rick Sandage writes that I must announce my retirement from the game of football due to injury. From Little League to the SEC, football has held a very special place in my heart and always will. I'm eternally grateful to my Lord and Savior for blessing me with the gift to play this game. I'm also extremely thankful for the University of South Carolina for providing me the opportunity to represent them on and off the field for the last 4 years. Also, thank you to my family, friends, and the Gamecock Nation for your continuous support and love. The best is yet to come. I plan to continue my football career by beginning to work as a recruiter with the University of South Carolina. Again, he ends it with forever to the Rick Sandage. We just went from one extreme to the other, talking about a professional organization completely botching a situation. This is an amateur athlete, a college football player, handling a terrible situation in the best way possible. That message was crafted tremendously, and classy is probably not the right word. Mature, I think. Grateful, thankful. I can't imagine having a better perspective on it and getting that message out there. It's exactly how you would draw it up, I think, if you were to advise someone. And I just put back a quick message on Twitter that hate to hear the news and will tell my kids about this specific example when I am teaching them the best ways to handle bad situations. And certainly, obviously, from where I sit, God has a bigger plan from Rick Sandage, and clearly he believes that as well. But it's devastating when this happens to anyone who's in athletics, right? We all know it's coming. You just don't know when. Can't play forever. But for a guy like Rick Sandage, his path was headed to the NFL. When you're the top signee at an SEC football program, I mean, everybody, 1 through 25, and I know they're not going to cap the classes here moving forward. It doesn't appear. But when you have 25 signees year in and year out, all 25 of those guys believe they're headed to the NFL. A lot of them think they're going to be at that school for 3 years and head to the NFL as a first-round draft pick. And you do have to have that confidence, that belief, that faith in a lot of ways. And Rick Sanford had that talent to go with it for sure. Unfortunately, injuries cut his career short, and now he has to go in a different direction. But handling the news, the messaging, all of it as well as possible is how I see that. Unfortunate for Gamecock football, but clearly he seems to have the proper perspective moving forward, and wishing him all the luck in the world for sure. From the Gamecock football standpoint, if we're just going the impact this has on the field, because Sandage had dealt with these injuries so much and not been a guy that you could count on in there to have a big season, or was, I think, from an X's and O's standpoint, going into last year, you could see the impact it had on the Gamecock defense up front, and where they were kind of already undersized to begin with, and it became an issue. But this year, that seems to be shored up. I know Shane Beamer has talked about it. He feels pretty good about what Jimmy Lindsey has done with the interior defensive linemen. Zach Pickens, especially a big part of that. I think Boogie Huntley up there talked about specifically yesterday, having a good summer and improving, had a good bowl game. Now Jordan Birch, Jordan Strawn on the outside, how they have to step up. It's their time on the outside from the defensive end perspective. So from an X's and O's, purely fan, what you were expecting or impact on the team, that's also part of the culture that you build, right? as I was watching Shane yesterday, this reminded me of how I got to the conclusion listening to Brad Scott's exit press conference on my way home as a college junior during Thanksgiving break. On my way home from Columbia back to Greensboro, where Brad Scott's career ended, and was listening on the radio to his kind of exit press conference and thinking to myself, man, I don't know if a nice guy can be a successful college football head coach. Shane Beamer, I think, strikes everybody as a pretty nice guy. And yet you have to have such a drive and I don't know what it is besides drive, as he was talking about this development, right? This is a big-time prospect, a player who has dedicated a bunch of his life to being a really good football player, and the news he had to announce yesterday is his career is over. But he puts that out at the beginning, and it's a note, but then it's moving on, where we're talking about the season and excited about it and everything else, and you can't get caught up in that. So drive is not quite the word, but you do have to have the mentality that, it's terrible cliche, and we heard it a bunch from Will Muschamp, the next man up mentality. You have to have that as a college football coach times, I don't know what, 1,000. It just has to be that kind of singular focus drive, knowing that you're in charge of much more than one guy, and yet still you have to have those individual relationships, and those players have to feel valued, those staff members have to feel valued, and that to me is the trick. And I think where we saw very obviously that there was the disconnect with Will Muschamp in a lot of ways, where I think he had that connection inside the building with individual players, and yet couldn't convey that, couldn't bring fans into that, actually did the opposite, right? Put up a big old wall for everybody outside of that circle of trust, if you will. If we're going to go an old school movie reference. And I saw that to some degree because of just the nature of having to announce that yesterday from Shane Beamer's perspective, and then it having to be certainly not the main theme of a preview kind of like press conference, a day to almost celebrate Gamecock football, their start of football season yesterday, what a preseason golf outing with media is. So absolutely tough news for Rick Sandidge, and wishing him the best of luck moving forward in whatever he chooses to do. On the opposite end of that spectrum, a Gamecock baseball player is moving on to the professional ranks and getting paid to do it. $125,000, according to Jim Callis, who's kind of the expert on all of this, at Jim Callis MLB on Twitter, where he put out the specific dollar amount of $125,000 is what Gamecock first baseman, outfielder, pitcher Josiah Sightler gets to sign with the Pirates as a 15th round draft pick. Mentioned that lefty power is his ticket. Athletic for his size, also 91 to 94 miles an hour off the mound. And Josiah Sightler himself putting out his perspective of things. A couple of pictures yesterday of him signing and very happy about it. And then a couple of messages as well. I'll read those now, what he put out on social media yesterday. This is Josiah Sightler after signing for $125,000 and moving on to professional baseball with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Man, what a journey it has been, from battling back from 3 surgeries and multiple other injuries while playing through a high ankle sprain and a fully torn UCL. My time at South Carolina was everything I'd hoped for. To the coaches, thank you for taking the kid from Gaston/Swansea, South Carolina into the program and giving me the opportunity of a lifetime. Y'all helped shape me into the person I am today, and I am forever grateful for that. I cannot thank y'all enough. To my teammates, y'all were amazing. Y'all quickly became my best friends, and our friendships will last forever. I will cherish every moment I had with y'all. To the fans, y'all made playing at this great university so much better. The atmosphere y'all create is unbelievable. To my parents, Debbie and Durock, yes, that's my dad's name, thank you for the countless sacrifices y'all made for me to get to this point in my baseball career. Y'all taught me what perseverance is and how to battle adversity. I will never be able to repay y'all enough. I am excited for this next opportunity in my baseball career to fulfill my lifelong dream of playing professional baseball. Go Pirates. Josiah Sightler, Gamecock first baseman, outfielder. Did pitch, I think, a little bit early on in his career, but obviously became the big bat in the lineup this past season, especially the back half of the season after a slow start, and had become a guy in the lineup that the Gamecocks needed to rely on. And clearly the Pittsburgh Pirates took note, and now the journey begins. This is especially going through that list of injuries, you can totally understand. And most guys actually go this route when this is the time you have some leverage to make some money as a signing bonus in professional baseball when you still have college eligibility left. So it's typically when you take advantage of that, or when you cash in on that. So $125,000, certainly nothing to. That is significant money, I guess might be the best way to put that, from how I see it anyway. 15th round draft pick moving forward now. And I think all Gamecock fans wishing Josiah Sightler well. Roger weighing in on the YouTube live stream saying, I hope Josiah does well. I understand he was looking at being a high round draft choice out of Swansea and hurt his non-throwing shoulder, so kind of took a detour, but now gets his chance. Yeah, and he would have had a chance to still go to professional baseball. I think he would have just not been able to get paid nearly anywhere close to what his value was being a big-time player out of high school, I think, because of that injury concern. I know Stuart Lake, who we have on the program relatively frequently here, always appreciate Stuart's perspective. He put out his thoughts yesterday, just saying to everyone who thinks that baseball players these days, kids these days, aren't like they used to be, you're wrong. Josiah Sightler is that guy. And the toughness, just with the message there of the injuries overcome, is a great example of that. And then not just that too, right? We have to be fair, he's played at a difficult time in South Carolina baseball, where I think he specifically missed the NCAA tournament a couple of times. He was on teams that missed the tournament a couple of years, which is not an easy place to be. That Arkansas transfer catcher came out and said it's tough to play at Arkansas sometimes. And he was talking about fans and their criticism when they're not one of the best teams in the country, or even when they are and they don't win. And then there was that one radio guy who just lashed out publicly and was ridiculously disrespectful in the whole thing. You guys might have remembered that story. And then that guy specifically just responded by playing well down the stretch, and obviously Arkansas went on their relatively typical run these days. But I bring that up because it's another example out there, probably the most extreme example, or the most public example, of big-time SEC programs like South Carolina and their relationship with what makes it so special, but also what can make it so difficult at times. The expectation's very high when you're not meeting that. That's what's happened at South Carolina recently. The expectation hasn't been met, and guys like Josiah Sightler have come under the microscope and get a lot of the criticism, and it has to only add to how difficult playing big-time college baseball can be in a lot of ways. but it's what comes with the territory. And you saw a classy message there for 2 Gamecock fans, and clearly appreciative of everything he's gone through. An easy guy to pull for. I think both of those guys we're talking about from the Gamecock perspective, Rick Sandage and Josiah Sightler. Unfortunately for Sandidge, he's on the opposite end of the career spectrum right now that Seitler is, headed to professional baseball, and Sandage's career over. Maybe a great reminder for everyone out there, but especially athletes, right? That you can be on a path, and very rarely is the path smooth, from big-time high school athlete to major college athlete to professional athlete. And Josiah Sightler has hit a bunch of road bumps along his way, a bunch of speed bumps in the road, and has been able to overcome, and now gets paid for it and is moving on and gets his chance. Unfortunately for Rick Sandage, it worked out differently. Anything else stand out to you guys from what you might have heard from Shane Beamer yesterday? Talking about the quarterback room specifically, and obviously Spencer Rattler is going to be a huge topic of discussion as long as he's a Gamecock. Most recently, the social media video of the smoke and coming back out, and then the Twitter exchange with Russell Wilson about getting fans pumped up, and Wilson impressed with Spencer Rattler's approach and the whole thing. But the significant upgrade in the quarterback room, where this time last year it was Luke Doty. Still, this time last year, Zeb Nolan was a graduate assistant coach. And it was Luke Doty's job. And behind him, I mean, even with him, you didn't have much experience. You were awfully thin from the Gamecock perspective. At the quarterback position, it was Jason Brown looked at as the backup quarterback with some experience, but at a lower level. It was a St. Francis transfer. You had Colton Gauthier coming in as a true freshman from the state of Georgia. But that was it. And compared to most quarterback rooms in college football, that was definitely towards the bottom of the totem pole. This year, you got last year's starter being thought of as a bit of a distant backup, I think, is fair to. Luke Doty was talked about so much this time last year. Such a talented athlete. And a guy who had split time at wide receiver when he first came in, and maybe that hindered some of the quarterback development in that year with Mike Bobo, and that's why you didn't see a ton of progression at the end of the season when he got his chance, and it was just his time, and they needed to throw him out there. But you got to see enough athletic ability to think, okay, maybe he's going to be a guy who can drive a new offense that was hoping to look a lot like Oklahoma's in a lot of ways, but take some Joe Brady concepts from Marcus Satterfield's time in the Carolina Panthers and the whole thing. Well, we didn't get to see much of it at all because of the injury. What was it, the second day of camp, third day of camp, something like that? That was when Shane Beamer came out and said, basically, shame on all of you who are saying that because of one injury that the season is going to be a failure, or you're not going to have a chance to win games. And that was an example of Shane kind of standing up, defending his program. And part of that drive and focus and intensity that you have to have as a college football coach that I kind of touched on just announcing the news of Rick Sandage and his career being over. But to bring in Spencer Rattler, an experienced college quarterback who has, the record is 15-0, I think, in his last 15 games as a starting quarterback. I get it. He got beat out at Oklahoma, and there are plenty of reasons to doubt that he's going to be a guy who will be in the conversation as one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. but there are also plenty of reasons to believe that he will be that guy. I finished QB1 last night. Man, what an interesting ending. If you guys haven't watched that documentary series, I think you got 2 weeks to do it on Netflix, and then it goes away. They're 10 episodes. They're half hour each. I recommend them highly. I wanted to do it to get a better sense of where Spencer Rattler was coming from. And the end only left me maybe with feeling like I had a less clear picture than a more clear picture of him. And then you throw in his couple of years at Oklahoma and winning a Big 12 title. I guess he was there 3 years total, right? The redshirt freshman year, watching behind Jalen Hurts, and then playing the next year, winning a Big 12 title. And then last year, starting the first half of the season and then getting beat out and transferring out of there. So you factor in just that college experience and then the way his high school experience ended, especially. I mean, unique. And I don't know. I mean, maybe Cam Newton is the last guy that pops to mind with such a big time reputation, and then kind of so many unique circumstances leading to how you perceive him in college at that point. I remember, Cam Newton was talked about at Florida and being a prospect, a guy who could push Tim Tebow and maybe was going to end up taking the job from him. And Tebow turns out to be one of, if not the best player in college football history. Newton goes to junior college, wins a national championship. Well, and had the issue with the laptop there at Florida as well. And then the Mississippi State stuff came out after he had been at Auburn and the whole deal. Always a lot of stuff around Cam Newton at that point in college, along with tremendous production. Trey, good morning to you as well, sir. I don't know if that UFAs, you want to go with that many S's, by the way. I'm going with a good morning Vietnam type good morning UFAs. Doesn't come off, I think, quite like that when you spell it with the multiple S's. At least that's not how I see it. Maybe that's just me. I'm glad you're a part of the program. Appreciate you guys popping in on the YouTube live stream, Twitter, and Facebook also rolling every morning, Monday through Friday, 8 to 10. From the video standpoint, Podbean is the place if you just want the audio version of the live show, and then podcasts all over the place, archives all over the place from there. He said that's what he was aiming for, that Good Morning Vietnam classic delivery from Robin Williams. I don't have that one in me this morning. Right now, still working on coffee cup number 2. Thoughts on the Rick Sandidge transfer news? Not transferring, Trey. Retired. And mentioned it already. Put up his statement. Handling it as well as possible. Certainly wish him the best. It seems like Gamecock football, not that you would ever get a head coach, especially at the end of July, to say this is a devastating move for our roster and depth, and I don't know how we're going to absorb the loss kind of thing. But you also don't want to overplay your hand publicly and then have reality not match up with your messaging. We saw the effects of that with Will Muschamp. Coming off of the Outback Bowl win, raised expectations going into year number 3, most competitive depth he's ever had, and then the team fell flat that season. The results, the production didn't back that up, and that was when Gamecock fans started to turn on Will Muschamp. And as I say that, I don't mean it as a criticism. I guess that I should say the tide started to turn in the Will Muschamp era of Gamecock football would probably be the better way to put that. Roger says, I'm impressed with the maturity Sandidge showed in this. Seems he fought injuries a lot, was a highly recruited player out of high school, but seemed to have a lot of humility and no bitterness. Well, I'm sure the feelings were there just being around and listening to guys who've gone through something similar to this. Marcus Lattimore is the most extreme example, right? And Lattimore's honesty about the feelings that go along with major injuries when that NFL dream is so close, and it was so close for him. And I understand Rick Sandage, when you're an interior defensive lineman, especially, you're not in the spotlight. I think Mel Kiper Jr. was the draft analyst that had Marcus Lattimore as the number one running back in the country at one point. Projected him to be a high NFL draft pick before the second injury, I think. Might have been before the first one, I'm not sure. But how Lattimore was so honest and so open about all the feelings that are attached to the promising career just being kind of ripped away by injury. So tough. So I'm sure those feelings were there, but yeah, putting out the statement that he did, just saying how thankful he was for the opportunity and how he knows that things are taking a turn, but still believing in the plan that God has for him, and also going to help recruit for the University of South Carolina moving forward. Yeah, tremendous maturity. Mature is a great way to put that. And also, that's the kind of culture that you want to cultivate when you're the head coach. That's ideal, right? And there is a huge difference, I think, is what I'm coming to from that public messaging being out there, and then that being a facade or the image that you want to present, and then it being actually a lot closer to the 100% picture of what's going on. And that's where I think a lot of us have just a completely different perspective or perception of the Gamecock program in a lot of ways right now, with Shane Beamer running it. It has been just year number one. We'll see what happens in year number two. A lot of the depth and the offensive conversation yesterday in Shane Beamer's press conference seemed to be completely different in a lot of ways because of transfers in, improved offensive weapons that seem to be available to Marcus Satterfield and the offensive side of the ball. But we can talk more and more about that as we continue to go with a week from today, preseason practice kicking off. So we got plenty of time to get to that. Right now, I want to get to our first guest of the program. His name is Dakota Watson, known Dakota for a while. He's got his Carolina shirt on and is newly in charge of Gamecocks Plus, man. Congratulations on the new gig.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and apologize. We are moving out of our house today, signing the papers, so there's nowhere for me to sit, so I'm creepily hovering over the counter.
No, it looks solid, man. Looks solid. I mean, it is. It's part of the internet experience is to see how creepy the setups can be for most. So you've got how are the cabinets? You want to check out? Can you show us? Let's see how far along the moving process is. Oh, you're good. You're golden.
There's nothing.
That's got to feel good, huh?
Yeah, the house is completely clear. We got to close in 2 hours.
Oh, good for you, man. Thanks for fitting us in this morning. Really appreciate it. And now
of course.
So you made the decision to get out of local news as someone who's done that before. Congratulations on that. I think you'll feel better and better about it the more and more removed you get from it. But then now, not only are you returning back to your hometown, being closer to the family, you got the young family, and you're closer to extended family. Great move in a lot of ways. And then you hit this gig, man. Tell us about how it all came about and how you feel about it.
The timing was pretty perfect, so that was nice. So we've got a 5-month-old, almost 6-month-old now, and first grandbaby on both sides. So the grandparents were fighting over, us moving closer and closer. We weren't too far away, but every little bit helps. So That was, of course, a big decision for us, but the timing just worked out perfectly. And the parent company, Sport and Story, is who partners with the university athletics programs kind of across the nation. They're already pretty established in Arkansas and Oklahoma State, and so expanding to South Carolina to create Gamecocks Plus. And when they kind of told me more and more about it, I was like, I need to hop on board with this. This sounds incredible.
So Bo Mattingly is the guy who runs Sport and Story. Is that who you interview with? Is that the boss?
I have not yet talked to Bo, actually, so I'm sure we'll get to chat here probably pretty soon. But I kind of just started up with this, and so yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of behind the scenes storytelling type aspect. You know, we want to get you that all access, and that's the part of partnering with the athletics programs. It's really cool is that we get a lot of that awesome, behind the scenes access that you're not going to get otherwise. And so us partnering with them is really one of the things that I was like, man, this sounds incredible. It sounded so cool and unique to me to be able to get that access to players, coaches, everybody else who's there, and it's going to be really cool. I mean, we're going to do a lot. We've already got a lot of great stuff lined up.
And some of that stuff includes just more of what Gamecock fans have now become accustomed to with Justin King's social media videos. You got that. You got combined. You mentioned the parent company of Sport and Story. They're the ones that are in charge of this 5-part documentary series that's going to be coming out soon too as well, right?
Right, yeah. We're partnering with ESPNU to kind of be able to get some of that content, and they're going to do a great job with that. And then, so kind of one of the things we're going to do is one of the sections of the website is called The Follow, and that's basically what ESPNU is kind of doing in a way with what they're doing with their 5-part documentary. So, it kind of fits along really well with what we already are going to do. So we're just going to kind of try to continue that a little bit once they're done. I think they're going to be done after the first game with their 5-part documentary. Of course, then we'll kind of pick up some of that coverage. It'll be a little different, but, in essence, it's very similar to that. But there's just all kinds of other stuff, too. And it's not just going to be football. It's every sport at the university, which is one of the things I think is so great. We're going to try to make sure that all the sports get some good coverage. And because all sports have great stories on their teams. It's not just football, basketball, baseball, those kind of things. So it's every sport. And that's what's going to be really cool about it, I think, is that we're going to be able to connect the fans to athletes that they might not have even ever heard of before, didn't even know played a sport at the university. So I think that part's going to be really cool too.
There are so many different layers of this, and you being on the local news side of it, it's always so in my head, being a part of that for so many years, there's like a divide line, right? There's the university that has the athletes, the teams, the stories, then the local media that's trying to connect fans, and a lot of times there can be a bit of a barrier there in between. This seems to help remove a barrier to some degree, and just to give fans a little bit more access in, and then you've got to make sure that the university is going to be cool with everything getting out. Is that kind of your gig?
Yeah, that's part of it for sure, and that's breaking down that barrier a little bit is one of the things that we want to do is we see whoever scores the touchdown or hits the game winner on the basketball court and all that stuff and hits the walk-off home run, and we know those people to a degree because we've heard their post-game press conferences and we've seen them on the field do incredible things, but we don't necessarily know their full stories, and we don't know, I mean, think about it. You probably don't even see them without a helmet on a lot of times, depending on what sport it is. So you don't really know, up close and personal who that person is. So yeah, breaking down that barrier to bring the fans closer and feel like, they're in the huddle, they're in the timeouts and that kind of thing. And I mean, of course, we're not going to be on the field. We're not going to be in the, in between the hashes there with them. We're not going to be right there in the grill 24/7. But we're going to have some good content, and it's whether it's miking up people and on the sidelines or whatever it may be. And obviously, there's we got to kind of do that dance there and make sure everybody's on the same page about that. But so far, everybody's been great to work with. So
it sounds. I know a lot of Gamecock fans are excited about this. I think another thing that when I see a new streaming service here in 2022, what you have to what I think about immediately is, oh man, another fee, like another few bucks a month.
I get it. Yeah.
But from this standpoint, it seems like most Gamecock fans who are already Gamecock Club members, that is going to be waived, and you're just going to get this thing free. Am I reading that correctly?
Correct. Yeah, there's a few things that I can touch on with that. It's not only are you correct about that, if you already are in the Gamecock Club, this is just an added benefit that you will get. So it's not like, man, I'm already donating to the school to be a part of the Gamecock Club, and now I've got to pay this extra, $8.33 a month. It's not extra for Gamecock Club members. And one of the cool things is, if you've thought about being a Gamecock Club member, you don't really know much about it, well, now's the perfect time to get into it, because if you sign up for Gamecocks Plus, then you get to be in the Gamecock Club on the Roost level automatically, which is the same price anyway. So you're getting really a 2-for-1 deal with that. And another important point to mention is, you talked about Justin King and his team earlier. And I really don't think I'm being very biased by saying they are the best or one of the best in the country at what they do. I think everybody would agree with that in the content creation world. None of his stuff is going behind our paywall. Like, that's all still going to be, free content that people get to consume. And so none of that, we're not taking any of his stuff that he's, fully producing and putting it. Now, we are working closely with his team, and we are going to be really, close with all of them and kind of be in a lot of shoots with them. But anything that he was going to produce or has produced, all that stuff is still going to be, free content. So we're just going even deeper and telling even more stories.
Look, we're both TV nerds, so we've been there. So we know everything that goes into creating those videos and those stories. And so from my perspective, as you were saying that, it makes a lot of sense. Maybe we'll get some cutting room floor stuff, right? From
Sure.
the Gamecocks Plus deal, and not necessarily just the finished product's going to be there, how it always has been released. And now you get maybe a little cutting room floor stuff. And I can only imagine that will be a tremendously well produced as well. That's the thing, that if you've never done it before, if you've never sat there and spent hours pressing buttons and cutting things out and putting it all together, you don't realize, man, it's a struggle to get everything in there that you want to get in there. And at some point, sometimes you just got to cut stuff just for time or whatever.
Right.
And it's still really good stuff. So I can only imagine what else might be left that we haven't seen through the years that this will now provide the opportunity for Gamecock fans to get.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about it. Like you said, there's just so much, we call it raw footage. There's just so much footage of stuff that whether it's the ESPNU documentary or whatever it may be of stuff, they're kind of, in a way, kind of confined by time restraint. If they're playing it on their broadcast, and that goes for all broadcasts, then, you get a certain amount of time, and that's how much you get to show. But when you're strictly, going to be online or streaming platforms, almost Netflix-based kind of stuff, I mean, there's no time restraint for what we can put on there. So we're going to be able to show all kinds of behind-the-scenes stuff, whether it's like you said, showing kind of what goes, in the behind the scenes of making some of those videos. The funny video that went viral from Coach Beamer getting ready for media days. We weren't there for that, but that's an example of something we could be behind the scenes and show the conversations or what went into planning all that and what, all that kind of stuff. And that's just one example. But and then we also are kind of working on some stuff that we're going to put in our vault, so to speak, of just like past stuff. I went into the archive system at South Carolina that they have on campus that I didn't even know the building existed. And I went to South Carolina, and it's over by Olympia Granby. If you know the Columbia area, it's not even really like in the heart of campus. So going over back there and finding all of this literal film that they have in meat lockers to keep it at a certain temperature. And it's just, as far as the eye can see almost, it's just everywhere. And it's so cool to kind of get that and put it on film and watch, like, for example, the 1975 Gamecock football highlights that has a narration behind it and all this stuff. So there's a gold mine of stuff back there. We're going to put as much as we can with all that kind of stuff on the website as well. It's a process to get all that digitized. So we're working with the university with that, but it's going to be really cool.
A couple of things dawned on me as you were talking there. Number one, you kind of described my show, or what we do here, right? It's now online. Hey, no radio break to hit at certain time and the whole thing. One of the reasons why I wanted to move in this direction personally and professionally and the whole thing. So I think a lot of us are on board kind of just seeing the evolution of media in general, right? From the old TV or radio constructs to online and the freedom that presents. Then the other thing that I thought about as you were talking about that is, do you think this would happen if Will Muschamp was the coach at South Carolina?
No comment. Here's the thing. Yeah, I think that I could have. I think it could have, because one of the things I can easily say to that is just it is all sports. So it's I think that was something that Sport and Story we want to do, is make sure that we're covering every single sport. That's a big part of it, is relationship with coaches and making sure that they're okay with certain things, and that's something that we're still we're relatively new working with Carolina. Obviously this year we're starting up, so. Just figuring out that, and that's an important part, because we want to have good relationships with every coach on campus and make sure that they understand what we're going to do and what we want from it, and that it also fits what they want from it. Certain coaches want certain things and some don't. So, that's certainly a part of it. And Coach Beamer has been incredible already. I've talked with him a few times about this, and we were out at his birdies with Beamer I guess that was yesterday. Yeah, all my days are mixed up, but. He was great with that. We put a mic on him and followed him around for what felt like probably about an hour. So we're going to have some great content there. And we mic'd up Coach Paris as well for a couple holes, and he actually sank a couple putts. So I said, maybe we're good luck. I don't know. But he was looking great out there. So stuff like that. Coaches have been great already.
It's interesting, because I feel like they have to evolve with where we are just socially, like just as a media culture as well. And it's got to help that those guys are of a certain age, don't you think? Like,
yeah.
I know you and I always had, like, you're 17 years younger than me, right? You graduated in 17? Is that correct? I graduated in 2000. So just you coming in and seeing the radio deal, and I think we threw you the Snapchat account, and see, like, I had no clue what to do with Snapchat. You're like, yeah, no problem, just do this, and that.
You're right.
And I consider myself kind of old compared to your generation for sure. Shane Beamer and Lamont Paris are about my age. So we've seen in our lifetimes things change so drastically, but I think we understand the value of that as well, as opposed to some older coaches like Kurt Ferentz was talking the other day, right? 67 years old at Iowa. And I can't imagine coming at it from his standpoint. So that's part of the dynamic that you're dealing with, right? Just different perceptions of what you do, how you do it, and kind of trust levels maybe.
Every single coach I've talked to so far at South Carolina understands the benefits from doing something like this. They understand that, like, there's so many young kids and whether it's to increase the fan base, whether it's to help with recruiting, any of that stuff. I think everybody kind of understands how important it is to be available, to show how genuine you are, because that's the other thing. Coach Beamer, Coach Paris, every single coach I've talked with so far at Carolina they're just genuine people. So something like this, Gamecocks Plus, there's nothing negative about it, because if you're just a genuine person and you can kind of show behind the scenes, and it's endearing to fans, to recruits, to everybody. So you've got to kind of stay on top of this game now, and coaches understand that, I think.
Man, it's crazy, because you've been out of school now 5 years. When I was out of school 5 years, I was covering Lou Holtz at South Carolina, and it was still the era of Dakota. We would go in, it would be me and Reggie from WLTX and Angela Mallon at WIS, and we would be the three cameras at post-practice availability. We'd be in a little room,
right.
And on the good days, we would get to the point and we'd ask our questions, and Lou Holtz would say, all right, anything else? All right, you guys turn off the cameras. I got a story for you.
Oh, my God.
So you're talking about being genuine in the whole thing. This was the old era of, hey, here's the public version. Yeah. Here's the behind the scenes stuff that only you guys get. And now we're fast forwarding not even 20 years, and it has changed so completely. I feel like what you're doing right now is the version for all of us of, hey, all right, turn the cameras off. Now you get the real stuff, and yet it's just getting put out on the internet for everybody to see in just a different way. And you can't be that guy anymore. You haven't been able to be that person for a long time, where you have the public persona and the private one, because there's just too much stuff out there. And now this is almost wiping that thing out completely.
Yeah, it's almost like, okay, turn the camera back on and come closer, right. And let me show you behind the scenes of what this is like. There's such a craving, I think, for fans for like more content, give me more. If it's something they love and care about, USC sports, for example, it's almost like we can't get enough of content. I mean, I'm the same way. I'm a huge South Carolina fan. I'm a huge Gamecock fan. So nerding out a little bit, because I get to see this great content coming in, and I'll watch every second of it. That's just how I am. And I think a lot of the fans are the same way. And So, I mean, soon after we launch, we're going to be up on Amazon Fire, Roku, Apple TV, all that stuff. So it is going to be just another app you download on your, your smart TV or whatever it is, and you can watch right there or online and whatever. So it's going to be so easy to consume. You can go, I mean, just like a Netflix episode, you can go into the different categories that we're going to have and go, oh man, that's awesome. They did an episode of that with enter name here. And then go in and watch that. You can pause it, come back to it later. It's just like that. So it's going to be, I think it's exactly what people want, whether they realize it or not. It's what they need too. So
it's crazy to me how much is all coming together in this conversation just in general. I was just talking about QB1. I just finished watching that last night on Netflix with Spencer Rattler. Now he's there. Now you're there as well, almost to help do a similar type version of that. Right.
Yeah. And I don't want to like overpromise by any means. We're going to let them be student athletes. I don't want to, we're not going to be in their dorm room every night and checking on them. But I don't quite expect the same exact in terms of every single day we're with the same people. That's part of part of it is we want to cover every single sport. So yeah, especially starting out, we're going to be launching here at football season. So, there's going to be tons and tons and tons of football content. And, I'd love to hang out with Spencer and get a day in the life kind of thing or whatever it may be. And that's all got to be cleared by South Carolina. But that's part of the partnership is we get some of that access that whether it's local media, whoever, they just don't get on a daily basis. So I think that's part of it.
The trust factor's got to be big here, right?
Yeah, exactly. So plenty of meetings.
Oh, man, I don't envy you on that one, but that's all part of the deal for sure. Anything that we haven't touched on that fans need to know just about this in general? So we've got, I think you mentioned it, $8.33 is what it breaks down to, $100 a year, right, per month, something like that. If you are not a Gamecock Club member, if you already are, you're good, you're grandfathered in. This thing's going to be coming your way. You'll basically get a login and you'll be good to go, I would imagine. And like you just said, maybe don't expect everything all at once, but this will be kind of a something that grows in so many multiple ways, right? A daily email and different type features.
Yeah, daily email's already started. It's called the Cockadoodle Brew. Thank you. I did not come up with that, so I'm not going to take the credit. But yeah, so that's already started. I think that went out yesterday was the first official one. If you've already signed up, and you can sign up for that. They've got a really good article or press release about it on GamecocksOnline.com about it. So just about their partnership and what exactly we are and what we're going to bring. And it actually breaks down the different categories. I don't know if we have time to do all that right. I only have my notes in front of me, but just the different categories, all that's in there already. And so there's just all of that information. And then it'll be on GamecocksPlus.com. We've already got the Twitter and Instagram and Facebook pages up. That's getting already a pretty good following. So that's where we're going to try to release as much information as we can. And then, once you get signed up, we're going to be here in the next few weeks before launch. We're going to be getting as much content as we possibly can and trying to, populate this page for everybody.
And I think it bears repeating what you touched on a little bit earlier and kind of my skeptical eye, the way I read certain news releases these days. It went to, now what's going to happen with what they've already done before and put out there? You're saying that is not going to be removed and put behind a paywall. It will be what it has been, and then it just an added bonus what's going to the Gamecocks Plus.
Yeah, exactly. There's going to be some stuff like we're going to take all the 5-piece documentary with ESPNU. Once they're done and that's been aired, we're going to put that on our site too. So that kind of stuff you'll be able to watch back on our site and some old games and stuff, whatever we can do. That's, like I said, it's a process to get all the archive stuff up and running. But piece by piece, we're going to try to get as much as we can that's really good content and get that on there. But in terms of stuff, like I said, that Justin King's team is doing, you're not going to pay extra for that. That's all still going to be out there. And the Gamecocks Athletics Twitter page and Facebook and the Gamecock football Twitter, all that stuff, that content, they're still going to be churning that out for you. So we're not taking any of his stuff or their stuff and putting it behind our page. So it's just all extra and more.
Good stuff, man. It sounds like you might be a bit of a mouth to the fire hose, the fire hydrant at this point with everything coming at you. What's first on your agenda when you start? It sounds like you're closing today in a couple of hours. Are you going back to work today, or are you back to work tomorrow? What's first on the agenda, or next week, however it is?
I feel like I'm just always kind of working currently, which is good. It's fine. We need to be, so I'm cool with that. But yeah, I mean, personally, it's close on this house and then move back into Columbia. So, but then, just from a Gamecock Plus standpoint, it was, finding the right people and getting staff and everything. And we feel good about, the people that we brought on. And then from there, it's just like, full on with equipment, and then we're ready to roll and we're getting content. So that's really it. And we're trying to get as much as we can in a short amount of time.
Good stuff, man. Congratulations on the new gig. Thanks for letting us know all about it. Anytime you want to come on and point people in a certain direction or highlight something, please let me know, and love to have you. Good luck with everything, especially the house closing today. Those are always interesting.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Tim.
Dakota Watson, ladies and gentlemen, new Gamecock Plus guru, I think is what we have to call him now. The general manager, I believe, is the official title, and my world's kind of colliding in so many ways. Crazy. Josh, I think it might be a little late for that. If you need a realtor, I got you. He says it sounds like he's good to go there, and I think they're all settled. But good to know moving forward there, Josh. And, man, July 29th, 2022, I don't know how many years you would have to go back. If you told me like 2 years ago that this was going to come, I'd be like, absolutely. Not surprising at all. If you told me, like I mentioned, back when I was covering Lou Holtz, when he would tell us to turn off the cameras, and I'll tell you the really good story. I don't know if I ever would have seen this coming in the future, that you would have a phone that you could press a button, and now it is a video service to watch tons of different Gamecock stuff. That is nuts. That is in a lot of ways. But I think Gamecock fans welcoming this, and because of the high quality of stuff they've already become accustomed to, that Justin King's in charge of, like Dakota mentioned, will be interesting to see how it evolves, and we certainly will be able to keep you up to date on that. Right now, going to welcome in guest number 2 on the program, who is doesn't deserve a backseat to anybody, is known as the number 1, and you're wearing the Patriot shirt too as well. The first round draft pick from an NFL perspective, the University of South Carolina, Rick Sanford. Glad to see you're in a good mood this morning, sir. Thanks for hopping on with me, man.
Well, when you wear the Patriot shirt, you're always in a good mood. You know that, Tim.
Oh, man, that takes me back to when I went to Carolina. I just happened to got paired up with a random roommate from Worcester, Mass. And he was a big Patriots fan, and it was a great time for me to be around a big Patriots fan, because they still had Pete Carroll back in those days, and it was pre-dominance, and I was able to stand him a lot more then than I would be years later, where you guys keep winning and winning. So once a Patriot, always a Patriot. Is that how you see it, Rick?
Well, you have to be. I mean, they were. It was really funny. I remember when I came out in the draft that year, I always, when I was a kid growing up, I always pulled for the Raiders. I was a big Raider fan, which was, just kind of strange, I think, when you look back on it now, because when I got to the Patriots hated the Raiders. And so it was always kind of interesting, I thought, to be drafted in New England after being a Raider fan as a kid most of my life. But I've been converted over, so I'm good.
Was that the Rock Hill upbringing? The Raiders a little edgy. I think Rock Hill had the reputation of being that as well.
I don't know. I used to watch a lot of the AFL games when I was a kid. There was the old AFL and the NFL before the merger, and I used to just really love the AFL games. The old Daryl LaMonica for the Raiders, Fred Biletnikoff, George Atkinson. And I just really liked the way their defensive backs played, Jack Tatum. It was just a lot of really great football players, through the years for the Raiders. And then, I'll tell you, I'll never forget, we were warming up one day in Foxborough. We were playing the Raiders, actually. And this guy comes over and he starts standing right beside our defensive back coach. And I look over there. And I said, this guy looks like a mobster, man. And I look again and I'm like, that's Al Davis, man. Al Davis was standing right beside our defensive back coach while we're doing our warm-ups, So I thought that was so crazy at that time. You probably see it more nowadays with the owners being on the field, but you never saw that, back in those days. But Al Davis was just letting you know, I'm in control here. I control everything regardless.
No doubt. That was certainly the reputation he has. So to hear that personal experience, tremendous. And just as you were bringing that up, I guess one of my first questions for you is, where do you think football is? What's your perception of football in 2022, having been through all the experience that you have, and even mentioning the old AFL days?
Well, I think, Tim, I think the game's changed so much from when I played. I mean, it's more played now out in space. I mean, you got to be a great open field tackler now if you want to play in the NFL. I mean, it's just the way it is. It's not the tall sweep and the power runs like it. If a guy if Steve Grogan passed 20 times in a game back when I was playing, that was a lot of passes. Now they throw 20 times in a quarter, it seems like. So I think that's where the game has evolved to. I think the game has become more wide open. Is that good? I don't know if that's good necessarily. Honestly, I really think that back in my day, I think we were much better tacklers than these guys are now. But a lot of that's probably attributed to them playing the game out so much out in space. So, I don't know. The game, they're trying to clean up the game a little bit, with the head injuries and but honestly, Tim, I don't think you can ever clean up football totally, because you just can't get your head out of the way sometimes. That's just the way the nature of the game is. And they've done a pretty good job, I think, of trying to teach kids to tackle differently. And I hope they're doing that on the younger levels now than when they were. Because, back in my day, we were taught to, stick that forehead right between the numbers, and keep your head up and don't drop your head. But now it seems like if you watch the way a lot of guys tackle, they do drop their head, but they lead with their shoulder more. So, that's probably a good thing, but it's I just don't know that you're ever going to be able to clean up the game of football totally.
Well, it's always been an interesting dichotomy for me, because violence in football is what we all love about it. I mean, if we get down to it, you know what I mean? It just we're attracted to that. I think men especially, right? But I think just people in general, there's something in the back of our skeleton there in the back of the brain. And then to say that things are too violent or dangerous, and then I understand all the CTE stuff was involved in the whole deal. It's just a tough balance, I think, in a lot of ways. And we have seen it change a bunch. I'm glad to hear it doesn't sound like it has turned you off completely to the game, but there is a bit of that is what I'm hearing. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. I think I get asked this question all the time. I was fortunate enough to make it on the highest level available. And I get asked by parents a lot, would you let your child play? And I said, well, no, I'm not going to let my child play, because I had two girls, so they're not playing football. but I say that as a joke, but honestly, it's a hard decision, I think, for parents nowadays to decide, do you want your children to play football? Well, if you're going to play football, I think if I had a child, I would make them aware of the possibilities of the injuries that you can get. I mean, I when I was a player, I never really had any surgery. I got hurt, but I never really had any surgery. Since I've been out of football, I think at the last count, I had 13 surgeries since I've left the game. And that's really all since I turned 60 years old. So it's it will break you down when you're later on in life. I will say that. And I've been very fortunate. I've remained pretty fit. I've got some problems, with my brain as a result of football. But it's just you have to recognize that that's going to be part of it. And so if my child came to me, if I had a son and he said, I really want to play football, Dad, I would probably say, okay, I got to make you aware of this is what it is, and I'm going to leave it up to you to make that decision. That would be up to you, but you need to be aware that this is the possibilities that you can face later down the road.
So it sounds like you would not advise for or against. It's just more the information piece that's the most important part. Is that fair?
I think so. I think every situation's different, Tim. I think as a parent, I think you have to decide what you want for your child. And And, I certainly understand mothers, particularly out there, that don't want their children playing football. I certainly understand that. I also understand, the mothers out there that say, you get a lot of skill from playing the game of football. Not only skill, life skills, you gain a lot, so it's a balance, I think. And I think you have to decide, as a parent, I mean, how you want your child, to grow up. I mean, pretty much. I mean, I think that is the good and the bad of the game. I think, I don't think there's any game that can teach you more life skills than football can, quite honestly. But I also think there's no game out there that can get you more injured other than maybe rugby, where they play without pads. But, I think you have to decide. And, again, if it was my child, I just have to tell them, I mean, this is what it is. It's going to be up to you now. Do you really want to do that? And, I love the game of football. I still watch it all the time. It's taken its effect on me somewhat, but, I still love to watch it. I still love the life skills that it taught me. And I don't know that there's any game, again, out there that can teach you that.
If you had known what you know now then, before you really started your football career, would you have approached it any differently than you ended up?
Whoa, that's a tough question. That's a loaded question. I don't know, Tim. I've been, luckily I never had to face that, because I started playing at 6 years old. And, I went from 6 to about 30, that's a lot of hits and a lot of years there, but again, I don't, for what the game has taught me versus what the game has done to me, I think that's hard. I mean, obviously, the easy answer would say, "Oh no, I wouldn't have played," but then I wouldn't have accumulated, some of the wonderful things that have happened in my life had I not played. So, it's a trade-off. I think it is. I think it's a trade-off either way. But, am I thankful that I played football? Absolutely. I am absolutely thankful that I played football. Am I happy that it's caused me a lot of pain and injury? No, I'm not happy about that. But, that comes with the territory. And again, that goes back to, if your child wants to play, I think that's the way you have to approach it.
One of the reasons why I love this format, Rick, is that we don't have a clock on us. We don't have to hit a break in a minute or so. You've been there. You did the radio for a lot of years as well.
Yeah.
You can have more nuanced conversations like this, as opposed to, I think my natural question from what you just said is, do you feel like most players from your era, or most guys who played football at the highest level, are kind of with you, that there are some mixed feelings about the relationship with the game of football when you're talking to other former teammates or former players out there?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of mixed feelings about it. I mean, there's some guys out there that wouldn't think twice about going back and playing today, and these are guys that have been damaged too, it's a tough question. It's football to me, it teaches you more about life than any sport does. I mean, because if you can train at that level, at the highest level of the game, and be able to play that game, you're pretty darn good. I mean, you're not that you're good as I'm not talking about skilled. I'm talking about you're mentally pretty good. And I think that's what, I guess if I had to say one thing, minus the 2 shoulder surgeries, minus the 2 wrist surgeries, minus the, partial knee replacement, minus the head injuries. I think I would say the life skill has really, done more for me, throughout my life, from being able to attain what I did from playing football. I just wish that it didn't come with all the physical problems that it did.
Sure. I totally understand where you're coming from on that one. Just want to let you know, Hope on the live stream here says, yay, glad to see Rick. And Roger is with you, says the Raiders were my team and still are. So he didn't have the Patriots experience that you had there.
Well, it's funny. Now that I've been out of football so long now that, of course, I pull for the Patriots, and I try to go back to Foxborough, to Gillette, to see a game every year, particularly when we have alumni weekend, because I get to see a lot of my old friends and teammates. But Roger, I pull for the Raiders still to this day. I want you to know. And now, since Josh McDaniel's the head coach, I really pull for the Raiders again.
Got the combo there from the Patriots background, right, for sure. You were talking about what you learned from football as a parent of 9 and 7-year-old boys now. I'm a big proponent of them playing a bunch of team sports and having that experience for sure. I think other parents out there, you mentioned them deciding if their child does want to play football. Is there a specific age that you would recommend them getting into it? I've heard all kinds of things kind of all over the spectrum.
Well, I think that one of the things that I kind of looked at this a couple of years ago, Tim, when I started having some issues with football, my brain issues that I've had. And I started looking at it, and I think probably the safest age to start playing tackle football is somewhere between 14 and 16, I think. I think it's great to play flag football, when they're that age, when you're your kid's age. I think flag football is great. I mean,
started them at 5, Rick.
They're
all
awesome.
Over it. They love it.
Now, I think it's great. I have no issue with that. I think you run into a problem when you've got these kids smacking heads when they're, in their very, very young years, because the old doctor in me comes out too when I think about the, repetitive hits and those type of things, particularly because, your skull's not even formed yet. I mean, completely, your brain hasn't even formed yet. So, my mother tells me to this day, she says, I need to apologize to you. And I said, well, what are you apologizing to me for, Mom? She said, well, because I let you play football so young. And I said, well, Mom, that's not, that's no big deal. I said, I wanted to play, but I think, they didn't know these things back then, and I think they found out through the years that it's the repetitive hits and also the major hits that are the biggest problem with football. As I look back on, I think what caused mine, I mean, I went through this is what they told me. They told me I had 6 major concussions and 6 minor concussions and 3 major concussions while I was in the NFL. And Lord knows how many I had, in college or in high school. But I go back and I remember telling one of our trainers when I went back to New England one time, they said, well, that's what you had on your records. And I said, well, how come nobody ever told me about that? I mean, back then, I mean, you got a concussion, you just kind of went back in. It was just what you did. And and again, I don't know, was the NFL concealing that? I have no idea. I do know one thing. I'll never forget, I had a terrible concussion against the Dolphins one time. And the next week, of course, we didn't miss games with concussions back then, Tim. So the next week I went in to see our trainer, and I was getting treatment, and I was still kind of slow to respond with my head. And some of the things I felt like every time he talked to me, I was like 2 and 3 seconds behind what he was saying. So I kind of, before I could even respond, I had to kind of piece together. But he said, we're going to put you in a different helmet this week. And I said, well, you going to take me out of the Riddell helmet? He said, yeah, we're going to put you in a bike helmet. And I said, well, why are you doing that? He said, well, it's a safer helmet. I said, well, then why the hell did you put me in it to begin with? So, it's just, but back then the NFL had a contract with Riddell, with the Riddell helmet. So I'll never forget when they put me in the bike helmet, which really was a better helmet, quite honestly, and padding and all. I'll never forget, we had to tape over the bike logo on the helmet and it was almost like they had written Rydell, the trademark for Rydell on it. But, I could go back and I could tell you so many stories like that. But, I just don't understand. I think if NFL's guilty of anything, they're guilty of that. That if they had a contract, they were trying to live up to their contract, even though their helmets were inferior.
Wow, what a crazy story that is.
It's a crazy story.
I mean, I get it, right? We all understand the financial implications of professional sports and the importance of it, but that is brutal. And Roger,
you can go back now, Tim. I mean, go back to my day and look at just research some of the players now and see the problems that they're experiencing from and I definitely think it had a lot to do with the helmets that we had on. I don't think there was any doubt that there was some inferiority to those helmets. And, I honestly, I'd probably have a lot more respect for the NFL if they would just come out and admit it. Just admit it. I mean, it's okay. I mean, just you've got the concussion lawsuit, and I understand there's a lot of players that are still fighting the NFL, and they'll fight them for years and years. And just be honest, be upfront about it, and I'd have a lot more respect if they did, for the league itself. Do I love football? I love the NFL. I love to watch it. Do I respect, some of the decisions that they made? Not at all. I think a lot of the decisions that they make are a little shady. Let me put it that way.
And did you put that in the present tense? Is that still going on? Just
I think
in different ways?
Yeah, I mean, look at some of the problems. I mean, look at the problems with I'll single them out because I think it's very well known. Look at Washington. Right now Washington's got a mess on their hands with their owner. I mean, he needs to sell the team. Let's just be honest. I mean, they need to take that team away from him, and I don't know why Goodell and the NFL and the rest of the owners don't demand it. I mean, I think it's crazy. That he still has control. Now he'll tell you that he stepped away from it, but believe me, Tim, with that kind of money, those guys never step away from it. They still have a hand in what's going on. If he didn't, he'd sell the team. So. But I mean that is definitely one team that needs to be sold. I mean, in my opinion, I don't think there's any doubt. And it's sad too, because that's a storied franchise, in my opinion. The Joe Gibbs Redskins had a lot of friends that played there. The Boston, Jeff Bostic's a friend of mine, and Jeff, played there a lot of years. George Rogers, George played with Washington, was a great player there. So there's Charlie Brown. I mean, I just feel bad for the franchise itself. That they have to put up with that as former players. They don't even have their former name anymore. I mean, a guy that played in the NFL all those years and great football players, they don't even have the same team. It seems like it's a new name. It looks like new uniforms. It looks like new helmets. It just doesn't even look the same to me.
No doubt. And growing up a big Art Monk fan. I was a big Redskins guy growing up, man. I'm right there with you. And as you were describing that situation, I couldn't help but in my mind make the translation to what happened with the Carolina Panthers and Jerry Richardson. How do you see the Panthers these days with everything that happened in your hometown in Rock Hill and the whole thing?
Well, the Panthers they need some they need some help, in my opinion. I had opportunity to meet JC at one of the spring practices with the Gamecocks this past spring, and he's just really a quality kid. And unfortunately for JC, I think he's on a team that's just not very good right now. They just can't seem to wrap their head around a good quarterback for whatever reason. And is Baker Mayfield the answer? I guess you're going to find out. That is if he can take the job from Sam Darnold, who, in my opinion, he's been pretty much of a bust, from where he was drafted. So, I mean, you got to look at it like this now, Tim. If you don't have a good quarterback in the NFL anymore, you can't compete. It's hard to compete. I know when I look at at the Panthers. I mean, there are just so many positions that they're just hurting at. I mean, outside of JC at cornerback, they still need safeties. They still need linebackers. You know, it's a tough situation right now, and their offensive line is not good. You know, it makes you wonder sometime with management, how do these teams get themselves into this quandary? Because the Panthers were so good for so many years, you know, but how do you regress to that point? You know, and I think a lot of it has to do with scouting and, you know, and their management in the past. You go back to, you know, and look and see some of the players they picked. I think JC is an excellent player, JC Horn, you know, but there's just not enough JC Horns to go around up there.
Is it ego? Is that how you get into a situation where you come in as a new owner in David Tepper, and then you go to college for Matt Rule and pay him a bunch of money? Is it that? Because I'm always fascinated because it fails so much more than it works. Taking a guy from college and moving him to the NFL. There was just a comment by the former Kentucky outside linebacker Josh Allen talking about the difference in Jacksonville this year. They're actually treated like professionals as opposed to what Urban Meyer did, and that thing blew up as well. Is that an ego thing from an owner and ownership perspective, or what is your explanation for why that continues to be a bit of a trend? And it seems to be the trend for the Carolina Panthers with that Matt Rule experiment.
Well, I think, you know, I don't fault them for hiring Matt Rule. I think Matt Rule was a big commodity when he, you know, there at the time, you know, when they hired Matt. I think you have to look underneath Matt Rule. I'm not saying that Matt's the greatest coach in the world, but I am saying that I think if you're going to be a great organization in the NFL and on any level, I think even on college level, I think you have to be good with everybody that's underneath you has to be good. And it has to be the support from the bottom. I'm talking about the very bottom guy to the top guy. And when you look at, you know, that organization, particularly after, you know, the Jerry Richardson thing, organization just kind of fell apart. And I think that you have to have, you know, you have to have a great general manager. You got to have a great, you know, outside of being a very good coach, you have to have a great general manager, and you have to have a great scouting department. You know, because what one scout might see, you know, in some player, another scout doesn't see that, and you know, of another organization. So I find it interesting, you know, that, you know, I've been worried about New England regressing, you know, because, you know, you go back to some of their recent drafts that they've had have not been good. I mean, you know, you can look at some of the players that they've picked. They've done a better job in rounds 4 through 7, in my opinion, than they have 1 through 3. You know, I go back to the draft Debo came out in. You know, the Patriots could have picked Debo Samuel in the draft. And ended up with the kid from Arizona State, who they just basically gave away to the Bears. I mean, they're just trying to get rid of him, you know, a wide receiver. And, you know, can you imagine Debo with the Patriots, you know, particularly 2 and 3 years ago when Tom Brady was there? You know, now I think Mac Jones is an excellent quarterback. I think they're going to be okay. I don't know that they'll ever get back to the level where they were. But I do think, you know, they're going to be competitive again. But I do worry about, you know, where they're at. And even Robert Kraft said the same thing. Mr. Kraft has said, you know, we've got to do a better job of picking players. And, you know, if there's one area that Bill Belichick has, I won't say he's failed, but I don't think he gets 100, is drafting top players. I've been very, you know, kind of surprised that they haven't been able to draft better, you know, under Bill. Now, one thing the Patriots have been able to do, though, for years is they plug and play guys. You know, they don't expect you to come in and play the entire amount of the game. They want to find a guy who is smart, who can adapt, you know, on the go during a game, and even before with the game plan going in. I mean, you can look at their past defenses and particularly, and you see they don't ever play same defense very often. They game plan their defensive schemes pretty much every week. They used to. I know that they've become a little more predictable, but they just try to find guys that are smart guys. You don't have to be the most talented guy in the world, but you have to be able to, if you're supposed to be in that gap, that we want you in that gap, you better be in that gap or you won't be here on Monday after the game. That's just the way their philosophy's been. And they don't alter off of that philosophy for whatever reason.
Bunch of people weighing in on our live stream here, Rick. Roger says Rick played with a great receiver from Easley that got away from Carolina Clemson, went to Tennessee, Stanley Morgan.
Stanley, I'm glad Roger mentioned that, because I think Stanley is has been mentioned for the Hall of Fame, and honestly, he should be in the Hall of Fame, Tim. I mean, I'm talking about the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You go back and look at Stanley Morgan's numbers versus some guys that are in the Hall of Fame already. Stanley Morgan averaged 19 yards a catch through his career. I mean, that is unbelievable that a receiver could average 19 yards a catch. They don't do that today anymore, Tim. I mean, I don't think Randy Moss didn't do that. There's guys that are already in the Hall of Fame that don't have that type of number. And and I love Stanley. I mean, I think Stanley probably did more for my career in keeping me up there 7 years than a lot of guys, because people always ask me, who's the best receiver you ever covered? I said, I covered him every day in practice, Stanley Morgan. But Stanley was great. And the other guy that I thought was a great receiver throughout my time was Cliff Branch. And I thought Cliff was one of the fastest guys I've ever seen in my life. But Stanley Morgan definitely belongs in the Hall of Fame. I mean, and I hope in my lifetime I'll get a chance to see him go in.
Jan weighing in with saying, I've always thought of Rick as a pillar of this university's football program. There should be another statue out front of Billy B there. What would you think of a Rick Sanford statue out there? You all for
Dan's
that?
just being too kind. I didn't win a Heisman Trophy, but I do think, and I've always said this, Tim, that I think there are some things that the administration hasn't done at South Carolina that they should have done, particularly for their All-American players. I think there's, and I heard this excuse years ago. I think we've only had, if I'm correct, somewhere around 22 to 25 All-Americans in the history of University of South Carolina football. And I heard this, and I brought this up years ago when I was on the radio. I said, what they should do is I said this would be a great recruiting tool for USC, because they don't play on their history as much as they should. Okay. But you put all your All-Americans' names, numbers, and years around the facade, all the way around the stadium there, on that middle level.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that at North Carolina years ago, and I think you see it up at Clemson with the Ring of Honor that they have. And I heard an excuse, and it came from someone in the administration. I'm not calling any names, but I will say this, and I brought it up to them, and I could not believe the reply I got back for that. The reply was, well, we're not going to do what Clemson does. I said, what? We're not going to do what Clemson does. I said, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. I said, maybe we ought to be doing what Clemson's doing, because they're pretty darn good right now, But, it was just, when they said that, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I said, because you talk about a recruiting tool. I mean, you could, if they would play on things like that, I mean, how many All-Americans did? It's not like they don't have room around that facade of that stadium to put 22 names up there with their number and their years played, here at Carolina, and I saw it at North Carolina. First time I ever saw it is when I went to see South Carolina play North Carolina, and it was years and years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago. And I thought, that's an ingenious idea. They had their All-American guys up around there. And I said, we need to do something like that at South Carolina. So I've tried to push that for years. And people say, well, they've got, around those, corners of the stadium, you've got, records by whoever and this and that, most receptions, most this, most that. That's fine. I mean, that's all fine, but that all should be secondary to the guys that have been All-American football players here. And, I've always just been an advocate that they should be recognized that way. And to me, it's not just for me, it's for the other 24 guys. Okay. That I advocate for, because, if you really want South Carolina on the roadmap, play on all the things that you have. Play on all the good things that have come through the school, and guys that have really made it, and been NFL players. You don't have to give the whole history. I'm just saying, put their name and number in the years they played at Carolina up there, and that, just put All-Americans, or whatever, and just wrap it all the way around. And to me, that'd be a tremendous tool, because a lot of these kids, quite honestly, Tim, when they come in as recruits, they don't have any idea how many All-American football players South Carolina's had, and we've had a lot. That's not a ton of guys, I know, but to me, you play on everything that you have in recruiting, and I just don't think they've done that in a lot of ways.
It's interesting to hear you as you're talking about it. It's almost a larger issue, former players' relationship with the University of South Carolina football program. I know every program has some issues with their players. It seems like every big organization and people who leave the organization and the whole thing. But in your experience in the NFL with guys from other schools, do you feel like South Carolina's relationship with former players is about what most places, most big-time programs are, or do you feel like it's a little bit different?
Well, I think that South Carolina's come a long way, okay, in that respect. I think that the administration's done a really good job in trying to mold a lot of the former relationships with the players. I don't think there's the animosity that there used to exist out there between the players and the administration over there. My only beef is with Carolina is I don't think that they've ever kind of I don't want to say, I'm not trying to say that what they've done is bad. I think they're doing the best they can. But when you have a recruiting tool like of what I mentioned, I think that you should utilize that. And I don't think that would, that a matter of fact, one time I went over there, I was over there on the field, and I looked around. I looked all the way around the stadium. I said, could they fit 22 guys' names up there or whatever? I look around and I said, they got plenty of room here to do that. So, a lot of people, have accused me in the past. Well, you just want your name. No, it's not that at all. I want what's rightfully should have been done years ago over there. I would like the administration to recognize all these guys, because it's only going to help the school. It's not going to just help the guys who are All-Americans. It's going to help the school, where you can play off of that. Say, look up there. There's, Bobby Bryant, or there's, Jadeveon Clowney. You remember him? A lot of these guys don't know the history in the past. You look at a Bobby Bryant who played 14 years, in the NFL. Who knows that? If you're a recruit, you don't know that. But, if you're recruiting that kid and you're a coach, you say, you see that name right up there? That guy played, you're a defensive back, aren't you, son? Yeah, sure am, coach. He said, well, that guy right there played 14 years in the NFL, and he played here at Carolina. So I think, to me, especially now with the way recruiting is, you better start utilizing every tool you got. And I'm pleased with what, Coach Beamer's done. I'm very pleased with, what he's done in reaching out to the former players. I think he's done a tremendous job. And I do look for great things for this team, in the coming years.
Man, I want to get into that if you're good with it time-wise a little bit more in just a second. But first, had a question in from Roger wondering how it was for you playing for Jim Carlin.
Oh, I love Coach Carlin. Coach Carlin was he was his own guy. No, I'll tell you that. He was he didn't take a lot off of anybody, and that was including the players. I assure you. No, but I loved him. He was he was really like a second father to me, particularly after I got out of football. And not so much during my football years, because he had a lot of kids that he was trying to watch. But once I got out of football, he was he was very, very close to me. He was a tremendous football coach. And there's another guy that should be in the College Football Hall of Fame. If you go back through Jim's record at West Virginia and at Texas Tech and at South Carolina, hard to match that. And look at some of the coaching staffs that Jim had. Bobby Bowden coached under Coach Carlin. There's so many great football coaches. Art Baker. You go back and look at Coach Carlin's coaching tree, and you would see it's pretty much unbelievable the guys that coached under him, and he's still not in the College Football Hall of Fame. But he deserves it on his record alone. The West Virginia teams he had were tremendous. Then he went to Texas Tech and proved that they were tremendous. And then, of course, when George decided to come to Carolina, that really helped our situation here. Obviously, but Jim was a great recruiter. He was a great man. He cared about his players. It wasn't just about football. It was about trying to get you a degree and get you out into the world as a successful human being.
I think that's a pretty good transition to Shane Beamer as well. It seems what he's brought off the field almost instantly in his introductory press conference, Rick. I said it at the time. I think he said things to Gamecock fans and people who attended the University of South Carolina that they didn't even know they needed to hear. And it seems to be a completely different type of culture and environment here just a year plus in. You mentioned you like what he's doing. Can you give us a little bit more about your take on what you see with Gamecock football headed into 2022?
Well, I tell you what I like what he's doing, Tim, is that he's got the players believing in what he's teaching. And I think that nowadays is a hard thing to do. You see all these kids on social media. Back we didn't have any of this social media thing going on when I was younger, but now it's all about social media. And I think he's done a tremendous job in navigating that, along with getting his players to believe in what they're trying to accomplish over there. The one thing that they've really done a better job of, I think, is recruiting. I think their recruiting has finally given them some depth. And one of the things I will be honest with you, let's all be honest. Without Shane Beamer's relationship with Spencer Rattler and Austin Stogner, they don't come to South Carolina. I think that you have to look at that and say, wow, he was able to get a kid that was a headliner for Heisman Trophy last year, going into the season. So, I think he's done a tremendous job with recruiting and getting depth in the coming years. I don't think you can see it really yet, but I think you're going to see it in the coming years. Let's say probably not as much this year, but you'll start seeing it next year and the following year. I think he's building a program. And quite honestly, I told Shane over there at spring practice one day, I said, Shane, I got to be honest with you. I said, I don't know how you did it last year. I mean, please explain it to me. I don't know how you win 7 games without a quarterback. How do you do that, Tim? That's impossible almost in today's game. And he said, well, Rick, we could have, 2 or 3 games could have gone the other way. I said, yeah, but they didn't. That's the whole point. So, it's, to me, that was a tremendous coaching accomplishment. And then the way that they coached that team against North Carolina in the Belk Bowl and throw in a whole new offense, essentially, with DeCarrion Joyner at quarterback. I mean, nobody had really seen that. Now, you'd seen him a little bit, spot play it here and there. But, that was pretty smart move. And I don't even know if Carolina's coaches even realized, going in, Is this going to be good or is this going to be bad? We have no idea, but this is what we got to go with, and they did a great job navigating that. And so when you win 7 games without a quarterback, I think you've done a pretty effective job in your first year.
So now, what is a reasonable expectation for year number 2?
Well, people try to pin me down on wins and losses and all that. I don't know that, you can say, well, if they win 8 games this year, that's a successful year. I think what you really need to look at is just look at the marked improvement of the level of play. Okay. The level that they continue to progress at. Now, will that transform into wins and losses? You hope so. But, that football is an oblong object that bounces in funny ways sometimes. And, I think last year South Carolina was a beneficiary of some good bounces and some good play, that they made some plays when they had to make plays. They also didn't make plays at times. But I do think that this team is very, very capable of winning 8 games this year. And when you look at the quarterback, Tim, I don't think we've ever had a quarterback that talented. I'm talking about skill level. I'm not talking about, wins. I'm not talking about Connor Shaw, who was a great quarterback. I'm not talking about Jeff Grants, who was a great quarterback when they were here. I'm talking about the skill level that these guys perform at. And I don't know that there's ever been a quarterback at South Carolina with the skill level of Spencer Rattler. I mean, when you can't say we've ever had a guy that should be up for the Heisman Trophy, this year. We just can't. And so my only concern with Spencer is I think at Oklahoma, he had a tendency at times to force the football when he didn't need to force, the football. I think if South Carolina can block for him, if they can, this is a big if now, okay? If they can block, if they can get good, just very good offensive line play. They don't have to be great. They just got to be very good because Spencer can move around, okay? But they've got to give him time. I don't care it doesn't matter if you got Tom Brady back there or Spencer Rattler. You still got to have time. And if they will give him some time, to throw the football, I think this team can be really, really good. I don't think they're on the level right now of Georgia. I don't think they're on the level of Texas A&M right now. So I throw those 2 games out. I'm not saying they can't win them because we see upsets all the time in college football. But I think if you're a realist, I think you got to say, those 2 teams are they're just better than us right now. Now, when you get to the upstate, I think South Carolina's catching Clemson. I really do. I think, this team, and I've said this to other people, I think South Carolina, this is going to be a much more competitive game with Clemson this year. I'll be very, very surprised if Clemson runs away with this game against South Carolina. I think the talent level's getting better at South Carolina. And when you've got a quarterback that can play, you've got a chance. And I think that's the one thing that Spencer offers them. And this might be the first year in a long, long time that I think South Carolina's quarterback's better than Clemson's.
I mentioned it the other day, with the ACC prediction and Clemson, the overwhelming favorite again, but all that pressure now pointed at the spot of quarterback, and for DJ Uiagalelei to play a lot better than he did last year, and for Clemson to get back to where they used to be. And then you got Spencer Rattler in. I don't think we've ever seen the quarterback positions more nationally relevant as the state, but the combination of the Gamecock and Clemson, even though you've seen Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson at the peak,
right.
With the Gamecock situation, man, it is fascinating. And from what I heard from you, Rick, I heard that you really feel like Spencer Rattler will be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. Any concerns about his offensive coordinator and them figuring out how best to use his talents and then the weapons around him?
No, I really don't have that concern. I don't think, I think that it was hard. It's hard to be an offensive coordinator when you don't have a quarterback. Honestly, it's very hard. I think that, Spencer Rattler will make the offensive scheme look a lot better than it did last year. And, and surrounding him with good receivers. I think Josh Van's an excellent receiver. I think the other kids that they brought in are good receivers. Wells kid. I think there's going to be some, the Bell kid is a very, very good player. I think he's a highly rated NFL prospect next year. So there's, they've got ability over there. It's not like they don't have guys, you've just got Spencer Rattler and he has nobody to throw it to. That's not the case. I think they have players over there. And one of the other things that they have that I think is going to play in their favor this year is cohesiveness. I think they believe in Coach Beamer. They believe as a team that they can go out and compete with anybody. And I do think, I think you're going to see the end of the year, barring injuries and this, that, and the other, I think you're going to see South Carolina play Clemson very, very competitively this year, where we haven't seen that in the past.
I know Gamecock fans like to hear that for sure. Do you see Clemson having a similar year this year that they had last year, or do you see them returning to form where they're completely separate from the ACC in a lot of ways?
Well, I think I'm not high on DJ at Clemson. I just don't think he's as good as as what he. His marking, he just hasn't shown it. I mean,
I think Dabo's the only one. The only one that I heard.
Exactly. I mean, you look at his numbers, they're not that good. I mean, they're just not that good, particularly when you're a 5-star quarterback. I think South Carolina's 5-star quarterback is better than Clemson's 5-star quarterback right now. And quite honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if Dabo changes quarterbacks to go with the young kid, at some point. I think Clemson needs to get off to a good start for DJ. I mean, to remain their quarterback. I don't think Dabo will put up with it, to where it jeopardizes them winning and losing football games. I don't see that happening. And the other thing about Dabo, he takes a lot of heat and all, but he's an excellent football coach. People can say, well, he doesn't know the game of football, and he doesn't, well, he wins games. That's all I know. And I think a lot of that, you don't have to be a great X's and O's guy, Tim, to be a great coach. You really don't. What you got to do is surround yourself with people who are really great X's and O's guys and have athletes that can perform. And I think that's why I think Coach Beamer, and I'll probably tick off a lot of the Gamecock fans, he reminds me a lot of a young Dabo when Dabo took over. He got those kids believing in him. And I think that's what Coach Beamer, and I mean that as a compliment to Coach Beamer. I mean, I think that's what you have to do nowadays. If your kids don't believe in you, you're not going to have much of a chance. And I'll tell you one thing, I don't think I could navigate a lot of that social media stuff the way he does. But that Soldier Boy thing was pretty ingenious. I thought that was a great thing, particularly, for young kids and recruiting. I mean, you talk about you talk about some of that. It was really, 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 really well done, and it really wasn't over the top, which was great. He didn't really, do the whole shebang, but he did just enough, to catch the attention of kids, I think.
It sounds to me like you're talking about a lot of what I've said before. The fit seems to be right with Shane Beamer and Carolina. The fit was certainly right with Dabo Swinney and Clemson, and he deserves a bunch of credit for getting out ahead of the curve with that social media stuff in a lot of ways, and Clemson really beefing up the recruiting efforts, and obviously it has worked and landed in a lot of ways with a bunch of their prospects.
Well, Dabo doesn't have to, prove himself to anybody. I mean, he's been in national championship games. He's won national championship games against a very, very good Alabama team. I mean, Coach Swinney's a very, very good coach. I mean, I don't think you can argue that. I know Gamecock fans want to say, well, he can't coach. Well, I'd like to have a coach that can't coach that'll win a national championship for us. That'll be fine with me. But I know he takes a lot of heat up there from Gamecock fans particularly, but you got to hand it to him. I mean, Clemson's had a tremendous program for years, and it's not a bad program to emulate. I'll tell you that, because they've had a lot of great players come through there, and You know, a lot of them are my friends, and a lot of the older guys are, and they've just done a very, very good job with their total program. I'm not talking about just their, you know, not their present day, but, you know, they've done a wonderful job in involving their older guys into their program.
Well, I think that's also a part of what you're talking about, not having to be necessarily a great X's and O's guys. I think maybe in 2022, that can almost be a hindrance in a lot of ways where you can't broaden out your program and see it from the big picture. I always thought Will Muschamp was a little bit tunnel visioned in that way, and as opposed to seeing the big picture and looking at the whole thing and making sure everything's moving in the right direction. I think Shane Beamer has shown he's a little bit better at that. But again, it's still early, and like you mentioned last year, Rick, it was an amazing coaching job.
Yeah, it was an amazing coaching job. I mean, I don't know.
Full game. Whew.
No, I've never seen a team win 7 games without a quarterback. I mean, in today's day and time, that's almost unheard of. You know, so I mean, you have to hand it to Coach Beamer to be able to pull that one off. And I think that's what has a lot of that has the optimism going forward this year, Tim. I think that you know that the ability of the players is getting better. Obviously, you've got a quarterback now. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind this team has a quarterback after seeing the kid in spring practice and just seeing the skill set. He's got a skill set. He can throw a football. Okay, that's not a question. He can let it go. He can throw it in a tight window too. But you know, I do think that you know, I'm going to kind of give a little caveat there. He's still got to have some time to throw the football. I mean, they cannot expect him to be the end all over at Carolina. He just needs to be a major piece of what they need to accomplish.
No doubt about it. I'm with you on that completely. Hearing Shane Beamer talk about having all his offensive linemen back except for one, I think from last year, all the backups back. It sounds like he's pretty high on that. I feel like this is almost a yearly tradition where we speak about the Gamecock offensive line one way in July and August, and then September comes and it's a completely different conversation. So we'll see for sure how that works out, right?
Well, I hope it's going to work out great, Tim, but I'm like you. I mean, like I said, I mean, there's the one big question I have going into this season is not the ability of the quarterback now. It's the ability to protect the quarterback. And I think that, you know, they'll have Marshawn Lynch will be a good running back, and they'll have a bevy of running backs back there that are going to be able to run the football. They're going to need to protect Spencer Rattler. If they can protect him and give him time to throw the football this year and continue to improve on defense, this team is going to continue to improve.
I think Gamecock fans loving your perspective on Gamecock football. Roger just said he enjoyed having you on here at RHillAA, where you can follow Rick on Twitter. Anything else we can get out there for you, Rick, that you want to let people know?
Well, just to tell them to listen to your show. You got an excellent show, by the way.
Thanks,
so, yeah, listen to Tim Hill. I mean, I think Tim's smart guy. Tim, you know football. You've been around it a long, long time. And, yeah, I would just follow Tim Hill if you need to know something about the game over some of these guys that are out there now.
Man, much appreciated. Checks in the mail on that one, Rick. Love to have you back anytime soon, man.
All right, man. Don't forget to leave the tip now, too, okay?
You got it. First round draft pick in University of South Carolina football history, Rick Sanford. His point about basically a ring of honor, right? For all Americans, it seems so simple, such a simple step. And I think it's part of the frustration from a lot of not just former Gamecock players, but Gamecock fans in like, just get out of your own way in a lot of ways. From a football program standpoint, make a simple step to help your football program feel the frustration there, and something to keep an eye on. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more and see if we can't push that thing through or help that public sentiment go through. Man, all of Rick's perspectives really appreciated, especially on his personal journey through football and now how that translates to 2022 and looking at looking at it, I think it's easy for those of us who get of a certain age when you're talking about dealing with kids to say, no, they should absolutely do this or they should absolutely do that. And him saying that you just got to give kids and parents the information and then they have to make their own decisions, and you got to respect that conclusion no matter what it is, I think is the nuanced way to look certainly at football in 2022, but I think in so many different issues out there. I really appreciate Rick's time. We'll get some clips up on the YouTube channel from his different perspectives today. We'll also get Dakota Watson's segment up there about Gamecock Plus being the new option for Gamecock fans as a streaming service coming up here. And we've kind of gone through the spectrum in a lot of ways today's program. And July now, wrapping up July. It's been a blast to do it with you. Thank you for being a part of the program, for all you guys commenting today, specifically on the live stream. York was one of the latest here. He said he hit it exactly. Raise the level of competitiveness. Compete in every game will be improvement for the Gamecocks for sure. The Tonester wanted to make sure we knew that he thinks all Gamecock fans will appreciate the behind-the-scene clips. Should be a big hit. More reason to join the Gamecock Club there. A great show from Picks. Appreciate that. Jan weighing in with the statue idea for Rick specifically, and Roger having a few questions there specifically. Josh, thanks for hitting us up. Hope all you guys who are in on the program today and do it relatively frequently, it is very appreciated. Feel free to spread the word. Like, subscribe, and all of that stuff on the social media always helps for sure. Thanks for checking out this edition, July 29th, 2022 of Tim Hill, Unrestricted Free Agent.